Welcome by the fifth podcast about MBT Groove Session.
Thank you. It's really great to be here for this one.
Yeah, I'm excited. There's this very specific expectation that I think we all carry when we talk about clinical settings, right? Or like medical interventions.
Oh, absolutely. We expect precision.
Exactly. Precision. Like if you were to walk into a clinic today with a broken wrist, you expect an X-ray.
Right. You want the doctor to put that black and white film up on a light board.
Yeah, and just point to a very clear,
Yeah.
jagged white line and say, there is the problem. It's visible, it's categorized, and there's a straightforward protocol for fixing it.
And it's deeply comforting to have that kind of physical certainty. I mean, we are just wired to seek out the tangible cause of our pain so we can apply a tangible solution.
Right.
We want the cast, we want the 6 weeks of rest, and the promise that the bone will knit back together perfectly.
But, and this is where it gets tricky, when we move away from orthopedics and step into the landscape of human relationships, developmental history, subtle emotional trauma.
That X-ray machine is entirely useless.
Completely useless. We are suddenly navigating a space that is profoundly subjective. We're looking at memories, at deeply ingrained defensive reflexes, at the echoes of childhood, just like playing out in a modern-day kitchen.
Yeah, and it's an environment that requires a completely different kind of light to see clearly.
And that is a really beautiful way to frame what we're doing today, because we are exploring the subjective, the relational, and the spaces where our internal realities basically collide with the realities of the people we love.
We are wading into the deep waters of psychological meaning-making here.
We really are. Today, we are taking you on a deep dive into something incredibly intimate. We're looking at the raw, reflective space of a specialized therapy session.
And we're not just summarizing a textbook on psychology.
No, not at all. We are following a real human being, a participant in a highly structured clinical program, as he sits with his therapist and tries to untangle two very complex environments.
First, his intimate life at home with his partner.
Right. And second, the intense, often overwhelming dynamics of his therapy group. Our mission in this deep dive is to act as your guides through his reflection.
To really slow down the tape.
Yeah, to look at the moments he describes, slow it all down, and understand what is happening beneath the words. We want to explore how people misunderstand each other, how they attempt to connect, and why those attempts sometimes just fail spectacularly.
Which happens to all of us. But to truly grasp the significance of what happens in this session, it's essential to understand the specific framework this participant and his therapists are working within.
Because this isn't traditional talk therapy.
No, the modality is called mentalization-based treatment, or MBT. And if we want to understand the mechanics of this participant's mind, we really have to understand what mentalizing actually means in practice.
I think for a lot of people, the cultural image of therapy is someone lying on a leather couch, venting about their week, while a therapist nods and occasionally asks, and how did that make you feel?
Right, the classic movie trope.
Yeah. It's seen as a space for unburdening. But from what I gather in these sources, MBT is not about simply venting.
Not at all. MBT is an incredibly active, dynamic process. Mentalization in this context is a verb.
A verb.
Yes. It is the active, ongoing effort to understand your own thoughts, your own feelings, and your own beliefs,
Right.
while simultaneously trying to imagine the internal world of the person you are interacting with.
Wow. Okay, so it's a dual process.
Exactly. It's the cognitive and emotional capacity to recognize that your perspective is just that, a perspective. It's a representation of reality, not the absolute objective truth.
So it's about maintaining a stance of curiosity then. It's the ability to pause and wonder why you are reacting a certain way or why someone else is behaving a certain way rather than just, assuming you know exactly what their motives are.
Precisely. And the underlying premise of MBT is that when we experience stress, like when we feel threatened, rejected, or emotionally overwhelmed, this mentalizing capacity physically drops offline.
Like a computer crashing.
Yeah, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for that nuanced, curious thinking, gets hijacked by the more primitive, survival-oriented parts of the brain, like the amygdala.
So we just stop wondering.
We stop wondering completely. We become entirely certain. We become certain that our partner is trying to humiliate us, or certain that a group member is deliberately ignoring us.
Right.
MBT is a rigorous training process designed to help individuals recognize when they have lost that capacity and to help them bring it back online, even when the emotional temperature in the room is high.
Which makes the therapist's role in this session so crucial, right? I
Mm.
mean, she isn't functioning as a referee for his domestic disputes.
No, she's not.
She isn't telling him if he's right or wrong.
She is acting as a temporal guide. Her primary function is to regulate the pace of his processing.
Regulate the pace. What does that look like?
Well, when he tries to speed past an uncomfortable moment in his story, she hits the brakes. She forces him to stay in the exact moment his mentalizing failed.
Oh, wow. So no escaping it.
Exactly. She highlights the physical sensations, the implicit assumptions, and the hidden emotional undercurrents, guiding him back into a reflective, curious state.
And we actually see this pacing instantly as the session begins, because the participant is giving the therapist a rundown of his week. And on the surface, it sounds like he is doing remarkably well.
He's been busy, right?
Very busy. He describes a week filled with immense physical activity. He has been gardening relentlessly. He's out in the yard, building a patio cover, measuring wood, installing window frames.
Moving from sunrise to sunset.
Yeah. But then he admits to the therapist that this isn't just like a sudden passion for home improvement. He says he has been running on autopilot.
Ah, yes.
He tells her that he is keeping his hands and his body so busy, specifically so his head is forced to stay clear. Like, he's terrified of standing still.
That word, autopilot, is the first major diagnostic clue in the session.
How so?
Well, when we think about what an autopilot does in an aircraft, it takes over the mechanical flying of the plane so the human pilot doesn't have to engage with the complex variables of altitude, wind, and navigation.
Right.
In human psychology, declaring that you are on autopilot is an admission of profound avoidance. The participant is handing over his daily functioning to a set of pre-programmed physical routines.
Because if the body is exhausted, the mind doesn't have the bandwidth to spiral.
Exactly. Physical labor is a highly effective, and I should add, deeply culturally validated defense mechanism.
Oh, for sure. We praise people for that.
We reward people for being industrious. But internally, the mechanism is about drowning out a signal. If you are hyper-focused on leveling a piece of lumber for a window frame, you are anchoring your cognitive load to a physical object.
Right, you're not thinking about your feelings.
You do not have the internal quiet necessary to feel the creeping anxiety, the unresolved grief, or the relational tension that might be lingering in your life. He is actively avoiding emotional stillness because stillness feels dangerous.
But the reality of sharing a life with another human being is that you cannot stay on autopilot indefinitely. Life eventually forces you to land the plane.
It always does.
And for this participant, the forced landing comes in the form of a crisis involving his partner. He tells the therapist about a situation that unfolded at home. His partner receives some distressing news regarding her family.
This was about a house, right?
Yeah, her sibling is in the process of buying their parents' house, and the partner feels the agreed-upon price is highly questionable. It seems she feels the parents are giving the sibling an unfair advantage.
And as the therapist teases out the details of this story, it becomes clear that the issue isn't really about real estate or market value.
No, not at all.
It is about emotional equity.
Right. The participant notes that his partner was triggered into what they call her small self.
The small self, yes.
The financial transaction surrounding the house is just a symbol. What the partner is actually experiencing is a profound sense of being unacknowledged by her own parents.
She feels she isn't being taken seriously.
Exactly. That she is somehow less important, less valued, and less visible than her sibling. She is plunged into a state of high distress. She is crying, she is highly agitated, and she is drinking wine to try and cope with this sudden influx of old, painful family dynamics.
In the language of MBT, the partner's mentalizing has completely collapsed here.
Because of the distress.
Yes. She is no longer in the present moment, sitting in her kitchen. She is emotionally transported back to whatever early developmental environment created that feeling of being the unseen, unvalued child. Her reality is entirely consumed by that pain.
So the participant walks into this environment. He sees his partner in deep distress, and he attempts to apply what he's been learning in group. He tries to mentalize her.
He makes an attempt, yes.
He sits down, he looks at her, and he says something to the effect of, "It must be a terrible feeling to feel that way." He is trying to validate her internal experience.
And if we freeze the frame right there, it looks like a textbook application of empathy.
It sounds great on paper.
It does. He is recognizing her pain and naming it. But human interaction is rarely that clean. because immediately after offering that validation, his own internal anxiety begins to bleed into the interaction.
Yeah, he cannot tolerate the intensity of her distress. Almost in the next breath, he shifts his stance.
Yeah.
He tells her, hey, don't shoot the messenger, because she is starting to direct her frustration outward.
Right.
And then he asks her to try and put the situation in perspective. He begins outlining logical reasons why parents might structure a house sale differently for different siblings.
He starts fixing.
He starts offering rational explanations for the parents' behavior. He's basically giving her a logical flow chart to prove that her intense emotional reaction is perhaps unwarranted, or at least out of proportion.
This is a critical moment of failure in the interaction, and the therapist zeroes in on it immediately. The participant is attempting what we call pseudo-mentalizing.
Pseudo-mentalizing.
Yes. He's using the vocabulary of empathy, saying, I understand this is terrible, but the underlying mechanics are not driven by a genuine curiosity about her mind.
What are they driven by then?
They are driven by his urgent need to regulate his own anxiety.
Wow. Okay, I want to look closely at this dynamic because it is so incredibly common.
It happens every day.
Right. Because when someone is drowning in a purely emotional reality, when they are feeling unloved or discarded, bringing logic into that space doesn't help. It feels like throwing a bucket of water onto a grease fire.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. You think the water is going to put the fire out because water puts out normal fires. Logic puts out normal problems. But an emotional trigger is a grease fire.
Exactly.
When the logic hits the emotion, the water turns to steam instantly, atomizes the grease, and the fire just explodes in your face.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. Because what does logic say in that moment? Logic says your feelings are mathematically incorrect.
Oh, that's brutal.
It is. When someone is in a regressed, triggered state, they do not need a rational explanation of the housing market. They need their emotional reality to be safely held. When the participant offers logic, he is invalidating her experience. He is essentially saying, if you just think about this correctly, you won't be sad anymore, and then I won't have to be uncomfortable sitting with your sadness.
He is trying to fix her reality so he doesn't have to endure it.
Yes.
And naturally, it backfires. The partner feels entirely invalidated. Her distress morphs into anger, and she becomes withdrawn and what he calls gruff toward him.
And this is where the relational system spirals. Because her withdrawal, her anger, now triggers him.
The environment has suddenly become unpredictable and hostile. His attempt to manage the situation failed, and now he is the target of her negative affect.
And what does he do?
He tells the therapist that in that moment in the kitchen, he became intensely alert. He went completely quiet. He physically withdrew into himself, even while he was still sitting there trying to somehow break through the wall she had just put up.
And this is where the therapist's skill really shines.
Yeah, she doesn't allow him to just recount the argument as a he said, she said narrative. She hits the pause button right at the moment he felt that intense, alert quietness. She shifts the focus away from the words entirely.
This is a defining technique in MBT. When a narrative becomes a closed loop of justification, he did this, she did that, and therefore I am right, the therapist will disrupt that loop by dropping down into the somatic experience.
So focusing on the body.
Yes. She asked him to stop talking about the house, start talking about his partner's family, and focus solely on what was happening inside his physical body in that specific moment.
She asked him, what did you feel? And he has a remarkably clear answer. He doesn't say, like, I felt sad or I felt angry. He describes a highly specific physical sensation.
He says he felt this intense, gripping tension in his head and a tightness pulling across his shoulders.
And he knows from his ongoing work in the therapy program that this physical tension is not just a random ache. It is a biological signal.
It is his body telling him that the environment is fundamentally unsafe and that he, in that moment, is completely unseen.
To understand why the therapist anchors this session here, we really have to look at the biology of trauma and stress, right?
Absolutely. When our mentalizing capacity collapses, we lose our ability to process information through the evolved rational parts of our brain.
The prefrontal cortex goes offline.
Right. The autonomic nervous system takes over. That gripping tension in his head and shoulders is the sympathetic nervous system preparing the body for survival.
Fight or flight.
Yes, the physiological manifestation of fight or flight. Blood is moving to the muscles, the heart rate changes, the senses become hypervigilant.
It's his biology saying, we are under attack. But the threat isn't a predator. The threat is the emotional withdrawal of his partner.
Exactly. And the therapist knows that if she can keep him focused on that somatic sensation, the tightness in the shoulders, she can bypass all of his intellectual defenses.
Because the intellect wants to argue about real estate.
Yes, but the body holds the actual emotional truth. The body remembers why her withdrawal feels so life-threatening.
And the therapist uses this physical sensation to build a bridge to his developmental history. She connects this tension to a very specific psychological framework they have mapped out in his past. She brings up the concept of the small boy,
The small boy is a clinical shorthand for a deeply ingrained schema.
a pattern, basically.
Right, a pattern of belief and behavior constructed during his childhood. For this particular participant, the early environment taught the small boy a devastating lesson, which is that love, safety, and attention are strictly conditional.
The lesson was that he, just simply existing, wasn't enough to warrant care.
Right. The underlying belief of the small boy is that safety must be earned. The child believes that if he just works harder, if he anticipates the needs of the adults, if he fixes their problems and behaves flawlessly, then he might finally be seen.
He might finally be validated and loved.
He learned to manage his own safety by managing the emotional state of his caregivers.
Wow, which casts the entire kitchen interaction in a completely different light. Because when his partner withdraws emotionally, when she is consumed by the grief over her family and becomes unreachable, the participant isn't just a grown man dealing with a stressed partner on a Tuesday night.
No, the present moment collapses into the past. His childhood trauma is entirely activated.
So the partner is not withdrawing from him. She's withdrawing into her own pain.
Exactly. But the traumatized brain does not have the capacity for that nuance. The small boy interprets her emotional distance as a direct, catastrophic indictment of his own worth.
The subconscious narrative is like, she is unhappy. I tried to fix it with logic. It didn't work. Therefore, I'm failing. I am not good enough. And because I am not good enough to fix her, I'm going to be abandoned.
The small boy takes the wheel, and the adult participant is flooded with an existential panic.
It is the tragedy of how unhealed wounds operate in intimate relationships. The therapist gently points out to him that his psychological protectors, the parts of his mind that generate that physical tension to warn him of danger, are incredibly convincing.
They are screaming at him, "This is an emergency. You are invisible. You must do something immediately to survive this feeling."
This is such a profound moment in the therapy, but it also highlights a massive challenge. We hear the term inner child thrown around constantly, like it's on every social media feed.
Oh, everywhere.
But when you are actually in the room, when a participant is drowning in the somatic panic of that small boy, how does a therapist actually help him separate his current reality from that historical terror? I mean, he's a grown man, but his body feels like a terrified child. How do you intervene in that?
You do it through a process of externalization.
Externalization.
Yes. The therapist intentionally speaks about the small boy in the third person. She doesn't ask the participant, "Why are you so scared?" She asks, "What does that little boy need right now?"
By changing the pronoun, she changes the perspective.
Exactly. She is inviting the adult, capable part of his brain, the observing ego, to step back and look at the frightened child rather than being the frightened child.
Which creates a sliver of psychological distance.
It does. It allows the adult's mentalizing capacity to slowly boot back up. The goal is for the adult participant to realize, I am safe. My partner is just sad, but this little boy inside me is terrified, and I need to offer him the compassion he didn't get back then.
But doing this in the sterile environment of a therapy room is one thing. Doing it in the heat of a domestic conflict is incredibly difficult.
It is the hardest thing in the world.
Which we see immediately as he describes what happened next in the house. The participant is flooded with this intense lack of safety. He tells the therapist that he felt an overwhelming urge to flee.
Fight or flight again?
Right. He is angry. He feels thoroughly unacknowledged. His attempts to help have been swatted away, and his nervous system is screaming at him to escape the kitchen. But he doesn't walk out the front door. He stays in the house.
And he engages in a coping mechanism that is just fascinating to unpack.
It really is. It is one of the most revealing moments in the entire transcript. It perfectly illustrates how sophisticated our defense mechanisms can be. He doesn't flee physically, but he finds a way to flee psychologically.
Let's talk about what actually happened.
Right. So the situation at home escalates to a natural breaking point. The partner is emotionally exhausted. She decides she has had enough for the night and announces she is going upstairs to take a shower and go to bed.
And he is still seething.
He is seething. He is frustrated and carrying this heavy, agonizing feeling of being unseen. But when he goes upstairs, he doesn't follow her to argue. He walks into their bedroom, and he makes the bed for her.
He makes the bed.
He smooths out the sheets, he fluffs the pillows, and then he adjusts the air conditioning in the room so that the temperature will be perfectly cool and comfortable for her when she gets out of the shower.
The way he describes this to the therapist is heartbreakingly self-aware.
It is.
He uses a deeply poignant metaphor. He compares himself to a dog that has been beaten by its owner, but still eagerly wags its tail and tries to please the owner, desperate to create just one happy moment, hoping the tension will finally break.
It's a stunning admission, and the therapist takes this moment and examines it with such care. Because if you were a fly on the wall in that bedroom, watching a man make the bed and turn on the AC for his upset partner, you would think, what a supportive, caretaking partner.
It looks like an act of devotion.
It really does.
But MBT requires us to look beneath the behavior to find the intention. The therapist helps him see that this act of care is not actually about his partner's comfort.
No.
It is a highly engineered defense mechanism. It is flight disguised as fixing.
It reminds me of a pressure valve on a massive steam engine. The participant's internal emotional boiler is overheating. The tension is unbearable. Making the bed isn't an act of romance. It is him frantically turning a pressure valve to release the steam before he explodes.
That's a great way to put it.
By focusing entirely on the crispness of a pillowcase, he is finding a transactional way to exist in the space without having to engage with the actual emotional danger.
That is the exact mechanism. He feels entirely out of control regarding her emotions. He cannot fix her grief about her family, but he can control the thermostat.
Right.
He can control the neatness of the blankets. He is manipulating the physical environment to restore a fragile sense of safety within himself. He creates this transactional dynamic in his mind. I have provided this physical care, therefore I have fulfilled my duty, therefore I am a good person, and therefore I'm allowed to escape.
And he explicitly tells the therapist that this was his exit strategy.
Yeah.
Once the bed is made and the air is cool, he feels he has earned his release. He leaves the bedroom, goes to his own separate space in the house, turns on a Netflix show, and he notes that the intense tension in his shoulders completely vanished.
He slept perfectly that night.
He even tells the therapist that, yeah, he slept perfectly.
Which presents a profound paradox in therapy.
How so?
Well, on the surface, the participant is presenting this as a victory. He successfully de-escalated his own nervous system, he avoided a screaming match, and he got a full 8 hours of rest.
A short-term win for the nervous system, for sure.
But the therapist gently guides him to see the long-term psychological cost of this strategy. She asks him to reflect on what happened to the small boy in that process.
Right.
The adult man got to watch Netflix and sleep. But the child part of him, the part that was screaming in agony because it felt unseen and unvalued by his partner, what happened to him?
The participant realizes that the small boy was essentially shoved into a dark closet and abandoned. He admits to the therapist that the feeling of the little boy was just gone once he left the bedroom.
He bypassed his own profound need for relational acknowledgement just to buy a few hours of peace. He sacrificed his own emotional reality.
He silenced his own distress.
Yes. And the therapist wants him to understand that as long as he relies on that specific pressure valve, as long as he fixes the bed instead of holding his own ground, the small boy will remain unhealed.
Because it's just being ignored.
And because it remains unhealed, it will continue to hijack his nervous system every single time his partner experiences a negative emotion.
Think about how universal this is. Like, how many people listening right now have swallowed their own hurt, their own legitimate frustration, and just aggressively washed the dishes?
Or taken out the trash.
Or cleaned the kitchen counters just to lower the temperature in the room. We tell ourselves we are being the bigger person, or that we are keeping the peace. But if we are honest, we are often just fleeing the scene of our own emotional vulnerability.
We are doing chores to avoid the terror of saying, I'm hurting right now and I need you to see me.
Exactly. It is a profound realization for the participant, but it naturally leads to the most difficult phase of therapy. Awareness is only the first step. The question becomes, what is the alternative?
Right.
If making the bed is a maladaptive flight response, how does this participant learn to actually stay in the room? How does he learn to take up emotional space and honor his own reality without triggering a massive nervous system collapse?
And the beauty of this deep dive is that the source material actually shows us what that alternative looks like.
Yes, it does. The participant brings in another recent example from his home life. It's an incident that seems almost absurdly trivial compared to deep childhood trauma. It's a disagreement over patio furniture.
I often tell people that the deepest psychological work is rarely done in moments of high tragedy.
Really?
Yeah, it is done in the mundane details of daily life. The patio furniture debate is his sandbox. It is the practice arena.
So the participant tells the therapist about a conversation he had with his partner at a recent family birthday party. Back at their house, they are redesigning the area under their patio cover. It's currently empty, and they need to buy furniture.
Normal couple stuff.
Exactly. The partner has a very clear vision. She wants a large dining table. She wants a place to sit upright and eat. The participant, however, wants something different. He envisions a lounge sofa. He wants a space where he can recline, relax, maybe have a beer and put his feet up.
And we must establish the baseline here. The participant explicitly tells the therapist what the old version of himself would have done in this scenario.
The pre-therapy version.
Right. Under the rules of the small boy, having a preference that directly opposes his partner's preference is classified as dangerous.
Because disagreement risks friction.
Friction risks her withdrawal, and her withdrawal threatens his emotional survival.
So the old protocol would dictate that he immediately caves. He would nod, agree that a dining table is a fantastic idea, and completely silence his own desire for a lounge sofa just to maintain the peace.
But because of the work he's doing in MBT, because he's becoming aware of his tendency to flee by accommodating, he attempts a new maneuver.
While they are at this family party, surrounded by his brother-in-law and some friends, he decides to casually test the waters. He turns to the group and asks for their input. He says, "Hey, what would you guys do under our patio cover? A dining table or a lounge set?"
It sounds like a normal conversation starter, but internally for him, it is an act of immense psychological bravery.
Really? Just asking about furniture?
Yes, he is practicing what psychologists call differentiation.
What does that look like mechanically in his brain?
Differentiation is the ability to maintain your own sense of self, your own thoughts, and your own desires when you are in close physical or emotional proximity to someone else.
Knowing where you end and they begin.
Exactly. It is knowing where you end and the other person begins. By stating his preference for the lounge sofa out loud in front of witnesses, he is allowing his own mind to exist independently of his partner's mind in a shared space. He is signaling to himself, I am allowed to want something different than she does.
But of course, any change in a relational dynamic creates friction. The partner is accustomed to the old protocol. She is used to him accommodating her needs. So on the drive home from the party, the friction ignites.
She confronts him.
She confronts him in the car. She is angry. She accuses him of trying to humiliate her in front of their family. She tells him that he clearly just needs other people to validate his opinions and that his only goal was to publicly prove that he is right and she is wrong about the patio.
And this is the critical juncture. This is the moment where the therapy is truly tested.
The pop quiz.
Exactly. In the past, this accusation would have flooded his system, his shoulders would have seized up with tension, the small boy would have panicked at the disapproval, and the adult man would have scrambled to fix it.
He would have apologized, promised to buy the dining table the next day, or desperately tried to find a way to make her comfortable again.
He would have looked for a metaphorical bed to make.
Yes, exactly. He would have abandoned his own reality to manage hers. But in the car, he doesn't do that.
He holds his ground.
He holds his ground, and what is so remarkable is that he does it without escalating the fight. He doesn't get defensive or aggressive. He tells her, very calmly, I am not trying to humiliate you. I just genuinely wanted to know what other people thought about the space. My intention was just to explore the idea.
He stays grounded.
He realizes, as he recounts this to the therapist, that he is fundamentally allowed to have an opinion about his own backyard. He notes that for a long time, his partner has been used to him just sailing along with her decisions. Because he is in therapy, he is working on himself, and he carries a lot of guilt about his own issues.
He felt broken.
He felt broken. He has let her steer the ship because of that. But now, he is drawing a boundary.
This is a beautiful demonstration of mentalization under pressure. He is holding two minds simultaneously.
Two minds?
Yes, he is holding her mind. He understands that she feels attacked and humiliated, but crucially, he is holding his own mind. He knows with certainty that his intent was not to attack her.
He refuses to absorb her projection.
Yes. Projection is when someone takes their own internal discomfort and throws it onto you. She felt insecure, so she accused him of trying to humiliate her.
Right.
By staying calm and anchored in his own truth, he essentially lets that projection hit a glass wall and slide off. He allows her to be uncomfortable. He allows her to be unhappy with his choice without feeling the primitive life or death need to instantly make the tension disappear.
It's incredible to think that decades of deeply entrenched, survival-based childhood trauma are being systematically dismantled over a debate about where to sit outside.
It really
It
is.
shows why these low-stakes, mundane domestic arguments are the perfect laboratory for MBT.
They are perfect because the cognitive load is manageable. If you try to practice holding a boundary for the first time during a deeply traumatic argument about betrayal or
The
abandonment,
nervous system just fries?
yes, the nervous system will immediately overwhelm the prefrontal cortex. The stakes are too high. But a patio sofa, that is a contained conflict. It's a manageable weight to lift at the psychological gym. He can practice the neurology of holding his ground without feeling like his entire world will end if he fails. He is building the muscle of differentiation rep by rep.
And what the transcript reveals next is that this muscle isn't just being built in the isolation of his marriage. The skills he is trying to use at home are directly mirroring what he is actively practicing in a much more volatile environment, which is his MBT therapy group.
The group,
The
yes.
individual session we are analyzing suddenly transitions into a deep reflection on the actual group dynamics, which are incredibly intense.
It's important to clarify for you, the listener, how an MBT group operates. Because it is not a traditional support group where everyone sits in a circle, shares their pain, and receives unconditional comfort and validation.
It's not just a big hug.
No, it is designed to be a live relational laboratory. The group is constructed to trigger its members.
Wow, on purpose.
Yes, it forces them into close emotional proximity with different personalities so they can observe their own defensive reactions in real time, in the room.
The participant recounts a specific incident from a recent group session. He was sharing a thought or an experience, and a female group member, who we'll call the challenger, went after him,
She challenged him directly.
directly and aggressively. She essentially told him that what he was saying was nonsense, invalidating his perspective right there in the circle.
We have to look at the pattern again. The participant tells his individual therapist what his historical reaction to that kind of aggression would be.
The small boy reaction.
Normally, a direct confrontation like that would sound the alarms. His body would tense up, the small boy would feel rejected, and he would either collapse into silence or frantically scramble to justify himself to make the challenger's anger go away.
But just like in the car with the patio furniture, the old protocol didn't engage.
No, it didn't.
He tells the therapist that in that moment in the group, under direct fire, he felt incredibly strong. He felt deeply grounded in his own reality. He knew what he believed, he trusted his own perception, and because he didn't doubt himself, he felt absolutely no need to frantically defend or explain himself to her.
He just let her be wrong about him.
Exactly.
That internal solidity is the ultimate goal of mentalization. But the participant notes a crucial external factor that helped him maintain that stance. He wasn't alone in the crossfire.
Right. Before the situation could escalate further, a third party stepped in. Another female group member intervened. She actively validated the participant and calmly but firmly diffused the aggressive energy of the challenger.
This illustrates the unique healing power of the group dynamic. When the challenger attacked, the participant's nervous system inevitably braced for impact, even if he remained cognitively grounded.
You can't stop the flinch.
Right, but the intervention of the second group member provided a specific type of psychological nourishment. She provided what the Dutch therapists call erkening.
Erkening. What does that mean exactly?
It translates to a profound, deep-seated acknowledgement and validation.
It's the exact thing the small boy was desperately trying to earn by making the bed.
Yes. But this time, he received it without having to perform or fix anything. He was simply seen and defended by a witness.
The therapist highlights a profound insight here. She points out to the participant that it is significantly easier for him to hold his ground, to stay perfectly mentalized and calm when facing a hostile group member than it is when he is facing his own partner in his own kitchen.
Right. Which is fascinating.
It seems counterintuitive at first, you know. You would think you'd be safest and most secure with your life partner. If he can effortlessly defend his psychological borders against a relative stranger who is actively attacking him in a therapy room, why does his highly capable brain completely forget how to do that the moment his partner gets upset about a house sale?
It all comes back to attachment theory. I like to refer to this as the alchemy of intimacy.
The alchemy of intimacy.
The people in the therapy group are important to his growth, but they are not his primary attachment figures. His fundamental survival, his deepest sense of home, love, and belonging is not tethered to the woman who challenged him.
But it is entirely tethered to his partner.
The stakes are exponentially higher.
Right.
When his partner withdraws emotionally, it threatens the very foundation of his emotional safety. The alchemy of intimacy dictates that the closer we are to someone, the more deeply intertwined our lives become, the harder it is to mentalize them when conflict arises.
Because our partners hold the master keys to our oldest, most primal childhood wounds.
Exactly. The group serves as the perfect sandbox because the attachment stakes are lower. He can practice tolerating aggression and holding boundaries in the group with the ultimate goal of transferring that neurological resilience to the high-stakes environment of his marriage.
But the therapy group isn't always a structured environment of rational debate and perfectly timed interventions.
No, it's often very messy.
Sometimes, the most potent, chaotic, emotional material doesn't happen when people are talking. It happens in the completely unstructured silence between them.
The transcript concludes with a stunning example of this phenomenon. It shows how the most insignificant, mundane non-action can detonate an explosion of psychological material across a group of people.
We can call this the ghosting
It's a
incident.
ghosting incident, yes.
The participant brings up a highly awkward situation that occurred outside the formal boundaries of the therapy room. The group session had just ended. Several members of the group walked outside and were sitting together on a concrete bench on the grass, just taking a moment to decompress and debrief before going home.
Normal post-group behavior.
Yeah. Then, another group member, a woman, walked out of the building. She walked down the path, right past the bench where the group was sitting, continued to her car, and completely ignored them.
She didn't look at them.
She didn't wave. She didn't say a single word.
If we look at this objectively, in the grand scheme of human events, someone walking to their car without saying hello is remarkably neutral.
Right.
The data points are simple. A person walked from point A to point B in silence. We have absolutely no factual idea why she did it. Perhaps she was deep in thought. Perhaps she was running late for an appointment.
Or maybe the session was so emotionally overwhelming that she didn't have the social battery to engage in small talk.
Exactly.
But when you are dealing with a group of individuals in MBT, all carrying their own relational traumas, a neutral event is never just a neutral event. It instantly becomes a Rorschach test.
A psychological projection screen?
Yes. The participant walks the therapist through the emotional fallout that occurred on that bench. For him, the silence was agonizing. He felt intensely unseen. He explains that considering the deep shared vulnerability they had all just exposed to one another in the room, to walk past them without even a glance felt like a cold, deliberate rejection.
It perfectly activated that small boy trigger. He felt invisible.
What is truly fascinating, and what the therapist immediately highlights, is how the other members on that bench reacted to the exact same visual stimuli. The participant describes another male group member who was entirely destabilized by the event.
He was very upset.
He was highly anxious, cursing, and obsessing over the interaction. His specific trauma response spun a completely different narrative. He was terrified that perhaps he was standing too still or looking the wrong way, and that the woman walked past in silence because she thought he was deliberately ignoring her.
His anxiety instantly cast him as the villain in a story that hadn't even been written.
He assumed he had committed an offense just by existing on the grass.
Meanwhile, the participant notes the reaction of another female group member sitting with them. She witnessed the exact same silence, and she brushed it off completely.
She shrugged her shoulders and said something like, these things happen. People are busy.
Her nervous system didn't register a threat at all.
I want you to really think about this for a second, because we all experience this. Think about the last time a coworker walked past your desk in the morning and didn't say hello. Or someone read your text message and didn't reply for 6 hours.
Oh, the dreaded left on red.
Yes. Did your brain tell you they must be busy with a project? Or did your brain instantly launch a highlight reel of every possible thing you might have done to offend them in the last 3 weeks?
It is amazing how a literal lack of action can generate more raw psychological data than an hour in structured talking.
It perfectly encapsulates the entire philosophy of MBT, doesn't it? A single, objective event enters a group, and it instantly shatters into a dozen different subjective realities, based entirely on the internal framework of each observer.
For the participant and the anxious man, whose core wounds revolve around abandonment and being unseen, the woman's silence was a blaring siren.
It was a relational crisis.
For the woman who brushed it off, who likely doesn't carry that specific hypervigilance regarding abandonment, it was just a Tuesday afternoon.
The therapist recognizes the goldmine here. She doesn't suggest they go confront the woman to find out why she didn't say hello.
No, that wouldn't be the point.
She points out that this is prime material to bring directly back into the next group session. The goal isn't to solve the mystery of the car walk. The goal is for the group to sit together and explore how their internal alarm systems reacted to it. It's about making these invisible, deeply ingrained patterns visible in real time.
And that brings us to the ultimate realization of this deep dive. The goal of this intensive therapy, the goal of all this mentalizing, is not to perfectly sanitize your life so that you never feel triggered.
Right.
It is not about reaching a state of enlightenment where you can perfectly read your partner's mind and flawlessly fix their bad mood before it affects you.
Because that's just another form of trying to control the environment. It's just another version of making the bed.
Exactly. True mentalizing is much harder, but it is infinitely more liberating.
It's about having the courage to sit in the messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes agonizing space of not knowing.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the tension in your shoulders when your partner is grieving or when a group member walks past you, and choosing to breathe into that discomfort without immediately rushing to turn the pressure valve.
It's about letting the small boy exist in the room, acknowledging that he is scared, but reminding him that he doesn't have to fix the adults anymore. He is not driving the car.
It is the lifelong, deliberate practice of learning how to be safely uncomfortable in the presence of others.
Beautifully said.
So as we conclude our journey through this clinical session, I want to invite you to turn that lens inward. Think about the dynamics in your own home or your own workplace. When the emotional temperature spikes, when you feel that sudden tightness in your chest or your shoulders, what is your version of making the bed?
What is your pressure valve?
What is the chore, the distraction, the sudden urge to check your phone, or the logical flowchart you use to flee the scene of your own emotional vulnerability? Because recognizing your own exit strategy is the very first step in finally learning how to stay.
It really is.
Thank you for listening to this group session episode of the MBT podcast. Don't forget to follow us to stay updated on new episodes, where we continue to explore what it means to mentalize within yourself, in relationships, and within the group.